The Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec. Part 3. Moral Laws. Chapter 11. The Law of Justice, Love, and Charity. Justice and Natural Rights.
Is the sentiment of justice to be found in nature itself, or is it the result of acquired ideas?
It is so natural that you revolt at the thought of an injustice. Moral progress undoubtedly develops this sentiment, but it does not create it. God has placed it in the human heart. That is why you frequently find among simple and unlearned people notions of justice that are more exact than those among very knowledgeable ones.
If justice is a law of nature, how may it be explained that people understand it so differently, and that what one individual considers just appears unjust to another?
It is because the passions are usually mingled with the sentiment of justice, thereby altering it. The same thing occurs with the majority of the other natural sentiments, and it causes things to be seen from an erroneous point of view.
How may justice be defined?
Justice consists in respecting the rights of every person.
Outside the rights consecrated by human law, what is the basis of justice founded on natural law?
Christ has told you, "Do unto others whatsoever you would have them do unto you." God has placed in the human heart the rule of all true justice through the desire that all deserve to see their rights respected. If you are uncertain of what you should do for your neighbor in any given circumstance, ask yourself what you would want your neighbor to do to you in a similar situation. God could not give you a safer guide than your own conscience.
Does the necessity of living in society impose any special obligations on humankind?
Yes, and the first of all is that of respecting the rights of others. Whoever respects the rights of others will always be just. In your world, where so many do not practice the law of justice, everyone resorts to reprisals, and that is what causes trouble and confusion in your society. Social life bestows rights and imposes reciprocal duties.
Since humans can be mistaken as to the extent of their rights, what guideline can enable them to know what limits to set on such rights?
The limit of the right that they recognize for others in relation to themselves under the same circumstances, and vice versa.
But if all attributed to themselves the rights of their neighbor, what becomes of subordination to superiors? Wouldn't that cause anarchy regarding all positions of power?
Natural rights are the same for everybody, from the least to the greatest. God has not made some from purer clay than others, and all are equal in the divine sight. These rights are eternal, whereas those established by humans perish with their institutions. Moreover, all individuals sense their own strength or weakness, and will always show a certain deference to those who deserve it because of their virtue and wisdom. It is important to point this out so that those who think they are superior may know their responsibilities for deserving such deference. Subordination will never be compromised if authority is in conformance with wisdom.
What would be the character of those who practice justice in all its purity?
They would be truly just and would be following Jesus' example, because they would practice both charity and love towards their neighbor, without which there is no real justice.
The right of ownership. Theft.
Which is the first of all the natural rights of humans.
The right to stay alive. That is why no one has the right to assault a fellow human being's life or to do anything that may compromise his or her corporeal existence.
Does the right to stay alive give them the right to accumulate what is needed to live on and to retire when they can no longer work?
Yes, but they must do this as a family like the bee, through honest labor, and not by accumulating assets as selfish individuals. Certain animals set an example of such foresight.
Do humans have the right to defend what they have accumulated through their labor?
Hasn't God said, "Do not steal"? And Jesus, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's"?
Is the desire to possess natural?
Yes, but when humans desire to possess only for themselves and for their own personal satisfaction, it is selfishness.
Nevertheless, isn't the desire to possess legitimate, since the one who has enough to live on is not a burden to others?
There are insatiable individuals who accumulate possessions without benefit to anyone else or merely to satisfy their passions. Do you believe that this is approved by God? Those who accumulate assets through their labor with the intention of helping their neighbor practice the law of love and of charity, and their labor is blessed by God.
What is the characteristic of legitimate ownership?
There is only one legitimate ownership: owning something that has been acquired without harm to others.
Charity and love for our neighbor.
What is the true meaning of the word charity as Jesus understood it?
Benevolence toward everyone, indulgence toward the imperfections of others, and forgiveness for offenses.
Jesus also taught, love even your enemies. But isn't loving our enemies contrary to our natural tendencies? And doesn't enmity proceed from a lack of sympathy between spirits?
It is obviously not possible to show tender and passionate love toward one's enemies, and that is not what Jesus wanted to say. Loving one's enemies means to forgive them and to return good for their evil. That is how we put ourselves above them. By seeking vengeance, we only place ourselves beneath them.
What is to be thought of almsgiving?
Those who are reduced to begging for alms morally and physically degrade themselves in an existence that puts them on the level of the brute. A society based on the law of God and justice should provide for the life of the weak without humiliating them. It should ensure an existence for those who cannot work without leaving them at the mercy of chance and goodwill.
Then do you condemn almsgiving?
No, because it is not the almsgiving per se that is reprehensible, but almost always the way in which it is done. Moral individuals, those who understand charity according to Jesus, seek out the unfortunate without waiting for them to hold out their hand. True charity is always good and benevolent. It is demonstrated both in the act itself and in the way it is done. A service rendered with graciousness thus has a double value, but if it is rendered with haughtiness, the recipient's need compels him or her to accept it, but his or her heart will hardly be touched. Also, remember that in God's sight, ostentation erases the merit of benevolence. Jesus said, "Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." Therein, he teaches you not to tarnish charity with pride. It is necessary to distinguish between almsgiving per se and benevolence. The one who is most needy is not always the one who begs. The fear of humiliation restrains the truly poor, who almost always suffer without complaining. It is these whom the authentically humane person should know how to seek out without being ostentatious. Love one another, that is the whole law, the divine law through which God governs the worlds. Love is the law of attraction. For living and organized beings, and attraction is the law of love for inorganic matter. Never forget that a spirit, whatever its degree of advancement or its situation as an incarnate individual or as a discarnate spirit, is always placed between a more evolved spirit who guides and perfects it and a less evolved one toward whom it has the same duties to fulfill. Therefore, be charitable not only by taking from your bag a coin that you callously give to the one who dares to beg from you, but by seeking out hidden poverty. Be indulgent toward the errors of your neighbor instead of despising the ignorant and the addict. Educate and moralize them. Be gentle and benevolent toward all those who are less evolved than you. Be the same toward the lowermost beings of creation, and you will have obeyed the law of God.
Aren't there those who are reduced to begging through their own fault?
Of course, but if a good moral education had taught them the law of God, they would not have fallen into the excesses that led them into ruin. It is upon this, above all, that the improvement of your globe depends.
Maternal and Filial Love.
Is maternal love a virtue, or is it an instinctive sentiment common to both humans and animals?
It is both. Nature has endowed the mother with love towards her children in the interests of their preservation, but in the animal this love is limited to the offspring's material needs and ceases when it is no longer needed. In humans, this love persists throughout life and consists in devotedness and self-denial that comprise true virtues. It even survives death itself, accompanying the child from beyond the grave. You can see that this sort of love contains something more than the love displayed in the animal.
If maternal love is so natural, why are there mothers who hate their children frequently from birth?
It is sometimes a trial chosen by the spirit of the child, or it may be an expiation if the spirit itself had been a bad father, a bad mother, or a bad child in another existence. See number 392. In all such cases, a bad mother can only be animated by a little evolved spirit who seeks to create difficulties for the child so that he or she will fail in his or her chosen trial. Such a violation of the laws of nature, however, will not remain unpunished, and the spirit of the child will be rewarded for the obstacles it has overcome.
When parents have children who cause them grief, aren't they excused for not feeling the tenderness for them that they would have felt otherwise?
No, for it is regarded as a task that has been entrusted to them, and their mission is to make every effort to lead them to the good. See numbers 582, 583. Besides, such grief is almost always the consequence of the bad habits that the parents have allowed their children to follow from the cradle. Thus, they reap what they have sown.